Hey everyone, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we are exploring a deeply transformative framework from investor and Stanford lecturer Graham Weaver. It's all about stopping fear in its tracks and living at your absolute highest potential. We're going to break down his core philosophy so you can tune out the noise and tap into a life of full power. Let's get started. Now, to really understand this framework, we first have to picture a 27-year-old Graham Weaver. He was a vice president at a corporate job he didn't really like, stuck at one of those painfully boring company offsites in Napa. You know the type, right? We're talking PowerPoint presentations with like 87 words on a slide, read at half speed. It was so brutal that he hatched an escape plan. He literally hid in a bathroom stall to avoid detection, sneaked up to his room, threw on some running gear, including a red bandana, by the way, and went for a run totally shirtless on the Silverado Trail. Fast forward 2 hours, he is having this massive runner's high, blasting the Rocky III theme song and shadowboxing in the reflection of a glass building. But suddenly, his stomach just drops. He takes off his sunglasses and realizes that the glass building is actually the restaurant where his entire company is having lunch. Yeah, he was shadowboxing shirtless right in front of them. Now, aside from the absolute sheer embarrassment of that moment, that fateful run was memorable for a much, much more profound reason. Before the whole shadowboxing incident, while he was out on the trail, a moment of just absolute clarity struck him. Through all the noise of his daily grind, he heard this quiet voice, and it said, "Graham, you don't have to do this. This isn't what you're meant to do." And it brought him an overwhelming wave of calm and peace. He realized that this voice was his actual truth, and he made a promise, right then and there, to start listening to it. And this highlights a constant internal conflict that, honestly, we all face. Weaver explains that we are basically always caught between two forces. Voice one is our survival instinct. It's ancient, it's loud, it lives right in our heads, and it constantly injects us with fear and doubt. It keeps us playing small. But then there's voice two. This is your intuition, your true self, your soul. It's quiet, and you usually feel it in your body, like a feeling in your chest or your gut. But because voice one is screaming so loudly, it completely drowns out voice two. This whole framework, it's all about silencing voice one so voice two can finally step up and guide you. To access that true voice, Weaver outlines 3 promises we must make to ourselves. Which brings us to promise 1, getting unstuck by taking out the nail. So, Weaver uses this brilliant metaphor here, the nail. He actually references this viral comedy video where a woman is complaining to her boyfriend about having headaches and immense pressure in her head, totally ignoring the fact that she has a literal nail sticking right out of her forehead. When her boyfriend gently suggests she maybe, just take the nail out, she gets incredibly defensive. And the crazy thing is, we do this all the time. We walk around with an agonizing nail, this obvious root cause keeping us paralyzed, and instead of just pulling it out, we try to fix absolutely everything else around it. Now, these nails generally fall into one of 4 paralyzing buckets. It could be bad habits that are just draining your energy. It could be unresolved past experiences that you've compartmentalized. It could be arbitrary rules or assumptions we put on ourselves, like, I absolutely must please my parents, or I have to follow this exact career path. Or very often, it's just fear. Whether you are stuck in a bad job or a draining relationship, your nail usually falls into one of these 4 categories. And until you pull it out, you simply cannot reach your full power. But pulling it out requires admitting it's actually there in the first place, which is surprisingly hard. Weaver shares this fascinating anecdote about a friend of his who suffered from just crippling insomnia. It completely controlled her life. She finally saw a doctor who told her the cure was actually pretty simple. Just stop drinking 4 to 5 glasses of wine right before bed. Her response? That's a horrible idea. She completely refused to pull the nail. Instead, she went to multiple doctors, got a whole cabinet full of medications, took naps all day, and essentially built this giant protective helmet right around her nail. So the first step to getting unstuck is simply speaking your truth. Admitting the problem really is half the battle. So why do we actively avoid pulling the nail? Well, it's because of the trajectory of change. Pulling the nail out requires accepting that life will actually get worse and significantly more uncomfortable before it gets better. Leaving a bad job or ending a toxic relationship creates this worse first dip. Change is incredibly uncomfortable. But here's the thing. You absolutely must go through that uncomfortable dip to reach a new, higher plateau. Everything you want is on the other side of worse first. Once we clear the static and grave that dip, we have to actually find that quiet, true voice. And this leads us to promise 2, finding the voice by following your energy. Now, this requires a major shift in perspective. Think about it. Every graduation speaker tells you to follow your passion, but Weaver argues this is actually terrible advice. Why? Because it implies you only have one single passion, that you're supposed to magically know exactly what it is by the time you're 28 and then do it for the next 40 years. It's incredibly intimidating. Instead, we should simply follow our energy. Energy is accessible, it's abundant. It just requires paying attention to what excites you right now, in this exact moment. Energy is literally the language of your soul. To identify exactly what gives you this energy, Weaver suggests a genuinely fascinating thought experiment called the 9 lives exercise. Here's how it works. Life 1 is your current path. But then you imagine 8 alternate parallel lives. The only rules, they all have to start from today, and they must be filled with things you are incredibly excited to do. You could be a startup founder, a Stanford professor, a DJ in Vegas, or an enlightened monk, whatever. By mapping these out, you instantly discover what activities naturally generate that internal energy within you. So now you can start pulling elements from those alternate lives right into your current one to spark some joy. But more importantly, you really have to look at those 9 lives and ask yourself this deeply revealing question. What would you do if you knew you wouldn't fail? By answering this, you completely bypass that loud voice of fear. You tune directly into the language of your soul and uncover your deepest, truest dream. Of course, finding your energy means absolutely nothing if you don't act on it. And that brings us to promise 3, following the voice by going all in. There's this powerful quote from Goethe that perfectly highlights the massive waste of energy that happens when we live life on the fence. We keep one foot in and one foot out. We say things like, well, I don't know if I'm fully in this job. I don't know about this relationship. I'm just waiting for things to clear up. But hovering in that uncommitted middle ground, that just leads to total ineffectiveness. And that is exactly where voice 1, your inner critic, loves to trap you, using the 2 most dangerous words in the English language. Not now. Think about it. Your inner critic rarely says you will never achieve your dreams. That would be way too obvious, right? Instead, it says, just wait. Wait until you have more money. Wait until you have more experience. Wait until the plan is perfect. And remember, not now almost always turns into never. So how do we actually beat the not now trap? Well, Weaver shares the story of a student named Sarah who really wanted to launch a startup but was just terrified of failing. Weaver told her to write every single one of her fears down on a piece of paper. Why? Because fears hold immense power over us when they stay hidden in the dark, subconscious recesses of our minds. Getting them out into the light on a paper strips them of that subconscious power. Once Sarah did this, she felt totally liberated. She broke past her not now barrier and decided to go all in on her startup, no matter how long it took. Going all in, just like Sarah, is the absolute key here. Weaver realized this himself when he finally committed fully to teaching at Stanford, despite his early fears of inadequacy. And what he discovered completely flips our modern understanding of exhaustion. He realized that true energy is abundant. It is not some finite resource like fossil fuel. Burnout doesn't come from just working hard for a long time. Burnout comes from friction, stress, tension, and living out of alignment with your true self. When you are fully committed to something that aligns with your inner voice, the internal conflict stops, and your energy actually multiplies. All of this leads to our final section, the payoff, which is living at full power. Weaver realized this after literally traveling the globe in search of the meaning of life, only to discover that the meaning of life is simply to find your meaning. It's to live your life at full power. And that power hasn't been hiding on a mountaintop somewhere. It's been inside of you the whole time, just waiting for you to clear the static and listen. Weaver concludes that life really isn't about making millions of impossibly complicated decisions. Since your energy is abundant and the power to change is already inside you, there is really only one choice you have to make every single day. So I want to leave you with this one final critical decision to think about. Which voice will you listen to?